Let us pray. In our mind's eye, we see the awesome grandeur of the Rockies, the denseness of our forests, the fertility of our farmland, the splendor of our rivers, the riches of all our resources. Then, O Lord, let us rededicate ourselves as wise stewards of such bounty on behalf of all Albertans. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 243, an act to amend the Ombudsman Act. This bill would amend the Act to extend the Ombudsman's jurisdiction to include any public service agency which receives 50% or more of its funding from the government.
The honourable member, order please. Order please. The honourable member for Edmonton Calder has moved first reading of Bill 243, an act to amend the Ombudsman Act. All members in favour, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion is carried.
A bill being an act to amend the Ombudsman Act introduced by Honourable Member Ms. Melsness is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce for first reading Bill number 214, an act to amend the Securities Act. This bill would amend the Act to lengthen the period following the commissioning of an offence against the Act during which charges could be brought before a court from 1 year to 5 years. Similarly, the period during which charges could be brought before the Securities Commission would be lengthened from 2 years to 5 years.
The honourable member for Edmonton Kingsway has moved first reading of Bill 214, an act to amend the Securities Act. All members wishing to give first reading to this bill, please say aye. Opposed, please say nay. Motion carries.
A bill being an act to amend the Securities Act introduced by Honourable Member Mr. McEachern is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table copies of the auditor's report for the Foothills Provincial General Hospital for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 1986. I'd also like to file with the Assembly, Mr. Speaker, a copy of a brochure that will be going to every household in Alberta this week and early next week, entitled The End of Extra Billing by Physicians and What You Should Know. Copies of that will also be available to all honourable members later this afternoon.
Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, I have the pleasure of two introductions today. I'd like to introduce to you, and through you to the Assembly, 33 students of grade 10 from the Daysland School. It's my favorite town in Alberta. They're accompanied by Mr. Milton Openshaw as teacher and by two parents, Mrs. Gould and Mrs. Lindball. I'd ask that the Assembly accord them the traditional welcome. They're located in the Members' Gallery. Also, Mr. Speaker, I have the pleasure of introducing two ladies from Camrose, Carol Dunlop and Lila Roseland, who are also located in the Members' Gallery. I'd ask that they stand and receive the traditional welcome of the Assembly.
Through you to members of the Assembly, 32 students from the Grant MacEwan Community College, together with their teacher, Dr. Winston Williams. They are seated in the public gallery. I'd ask that they stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly 36 pioneers from the Glendon area of my constituency. Glendon is a village located in the heart of the beautiful Lakeland. The 36 senior citizens are led by group leader Anna Erickson, accompanied by bus driver Marcel Lapierre. They're seated in the members' gallery, and I'd ask that they stand and receive the welcome of the House.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Environment. Mr. Speaker, it has to do with the 4 million litre spill of contaminated water into the river northeast of Edmonton. Mr. Speaker, the Minister's response, as I understand it, seems to indicate that the two companies should be embarrassed. That's pretty powerful stuff coming from the Minister of Environment. My question is this the extent of what the Minister is going to do about these spills?
Mr. Speaker, the answer is no. And while I'm on my feet, there are a number of people from Bonnyville, which is my hometown. Some people up there I've seen before.
Well, I never cease to be amazed by the answers we get in this Assembly. Mr. Speaker, my question then, to be a little more specific, when is the Minister of Environment going to stop scolding polluters and being embarrassed for them and begin taking some concrete action to stop them instead?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't recall making a statement in the House in the last number of days that somebody should be embarrassed or anything else to that effect with this matter. I certainly made it outside of the House, and I believe very, very sincerely that SO Chemicals Limited and Sherwood Gordon Mines Limited should both be very, very embarrassed. And in terms of the action, I think that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition well knows that it was in September 16, which is yesterday, that water quality control order was issued to SO Chemicals Limited. The water control order basically lists in 6 items that SO Chemical Alberta Limited is going to have to fulfill, with some date lines in terms of October 31, 1986, December 31, 1986, October 15, 1986, that will be fulfilled by SO Chemicals, and failure to do that would see SO Chemical Limited brought to court, and the penalties for failure to fulfill what is being directed under the water quality order would lead to a maximum fine of $25,000 or in default of payment 3 months imprisonment. And later today, we will be issuing a water quality control order to Sherwood Gordon, outlining a series of steps that particular company will have to fulfill, and failure to comply with the water quality order could very well lead to charges, and if found guilty, to fines of a maximum of $25,000 or default to payment 3 months imprisonment.
Supplementary question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker. It's all very well and dandy. I guess we're going to work with them ahead, but it seems to me that the Minister has power now to charge the companies under the Clean Water Act. And my question is, why hasn't he done that at this particular time?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the last numbers of days, both companies in question provided information to Alberta Environment as per the rules. Preliminary investigations were held, consultations and discussions were held between officials of Alberta Environment and the two companies in question. And it appears, not conclusively, but it appears that in the case of the SO chemical spill, that there was a force of nature that was involved in that. And it appears that in the essence of the Sherwood Gordon spill, that there could very well have been human error with respect to the shutting off of one pump and the turning on of another pump. These are matters, unfortunately, that have happened. These are matters that have been reported. The companies in both cases have responded, and the government have said, that's fine, that's not good enough, but we are going to make this as a public matter, and we are going to issue statements to the people of Alberta and introduce water quality control orders with respect to those companies as well.
Mr. Speaker, that's all very well and dandy. Almost all lawbreakers would like the same sorts of considerations. It's up to the courts to decide the reason. Surely it's the minister's job to lay the charges. And my question is, specifically, will the minister lay the charges or not, and let the courts decide how serious it was? That's their job.
Well, under the process that has been well established, and directed by law in the province of Alberta, and those laws have been debated in this particular assembly, those laws lead to certain processes. And if either company were to ignore the directive that the government has provided to them, then it would be no decision, one way or the other, on my part, to see that law proceedings would be initiated. But at the moment, every safety precaution and every response has been provided to in a responsible area. I'm not happy at all that that's happened, and I don't think that any self-respecting Albertan would be happy that it has happened. But in the case of both companies and the people associated with them, they have responded in complete openness. They have identified what the problems were and how they've been created. And if you want to put somebody in jail, the question is, the law of Alberta clearly indicates that they have now been directed to do certain things. If they fail to do those certain things, then we'll go the next step.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Environment, surely he knows that human error is no excuse. Try telling that to the traffic cop next time. Could the minister answer me as to whether or not these companies have ever been dumped or charged or broken the rules of pollution of the river in the last 5 years?
It's my understanding that in the case of Esso Chemicals Limited that this has never happened in the 17 years of association with that particular plant. They've never ever had a water quality order issued to them. In the case of Sherrod Gordon, I don't have that particular answer.
Supplementary, member for Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, what directives or what directives have been given downstream to the communities that are taking water out of the North Saskatchewan as to the safety or non-safety of the water that's being drawn from the river?
Mr. Speaker, there are no communities in the province of Alberta that take water directly out of the North Saskatchewan River, save for the city of Lloydminster, and all municipalities along the way have been advised. In the case of the city of Lloydminster, they have a reservoir which contains 14 days drinking water supply. This particular plume, in the case of Esso Chemicals, is moving downriver at approximately 1.8 to 2 miles per hour. Probably reach Lloydminster in the weekend. There are 3 cities in Saskatchewan, including Lloydminster. There's North Battleford and Prince Albert. They have been advised, as has the Saskatchewan Department of the Environment.
Second main question, Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct this question to the Acting Social Services Minister. And my question is simply this, to the Acting whoever they are, I think it's you over there, I'm told, anyhow. Why are local social service agencies which provide help to the most needy in our society in the most needy time being asked by departmental officials to develop budgets for next year at levels 5 and 10% below this year?
Why?
Surprise. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Social Services is not able to be in the House this afternoon because of an earlier commitment. I could have her answer the question. I could give her the answer and ask that she reply to the member's question tomorrow afternoon.
Mr. Speaker, I greatly appreciate that answer. But if I may follow up with the Acting Minister and his precise answers, it has to do with government policy. It seems that this is more in a general government review. They're being asked to develop real plans for these sorts of cutbacks. And my question is to the government, why doesn't the government take the approach instead of looking at the real needs of the clients so that the fat will be cut where necessary, but also so that the poor and the disadvantaged are not made to pay for this government's mismanagement?
Speaker, I think that I could easily pass that question to the honourable provincial treasurer in that he might want to comment on the fiscal policies of the government, Mr. Speaker. But as for the impact on the Department of Social Services, I believe the Honourable Minister of Social Services would want to answer that question herself.
Question, Mr. Speaker. I love the answer so far. To far along in social services, because we are not sure how long we'll be here, I want to just deal with the specific case of the late Mr. Belanger and his family of Morinville, and allegations have surfaced that the Social Services Department was repeatedly warned of the need for intervention. My question is to the government, whoever wants to answer it, is what sort of independent inquiry will the government be appointing to get to the facts of this matter, and which will recommend improvements in departmental responses to crises?
Mr. Speaker.
Leader could draw some kind of linkage between the original two questions and this one for the chair's sake.
With social services, the disadvantaged, and how the service agencies aren't reacting to these sorts of problems.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to take the question as notice on this very tragic incident, and refer the question to the Minister of Social Services for when she returns to the House tomorrow.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps I could add something to the answer already given, in the sense that the Fatality Inquiries Act has in place the potential, if the Fatality Review Board makes that decision in that case, to have a public inquiry, and that would be under the direction of a provincial court judge. I should add that when the Fatality Review Board considers deaths of that type, they make their decision on all of the investigations up to that point that they have access to. And I won't predict whether or not the board would make an order for inquiry in this case, but that is the process, and it could well result in a public inquiry.
Supplementary question to the Minister that may well be, but it seems to me we're dealing here with government policy in terms of the response time of the Social Services Department. And my question then to the Minister, beyond that, would the government be prepared to provide their own inquiry into the response time of Social Services Department and seeing if clients are being adequately protected?
Mr. Speaker, any inquiry that is held, if one is held under the Fatality Inquiries Act, should point to some information in respect to the background of that family that would help us in determining whether a further inquiry is justified. I could, I think, assure the Honourable Leader that if further inquiry is necessary, including on the specific point of response time, we would undertake that.
Member for Edmonton Gold Bar, supplementary.
Supplementary to the Acting Minister for Social Services, Mr. Speaker. There's no question the needs in our communities are escalating due to the economy. All social service agencies are feeling the pressure. The Minister has stated or has indicated to us that her department may in fact have to go back to the Treasurer for supplementary funds. Perhaps this Minister will answer, or would he please ask the Minister, how is a budget cut, how could it possibly be compatible with these facts?
Mr. Speaker, the facts are tragic. the incident is a very, very tragic one. But on the broader question, Mr. Speaker, it is a matter that I believe the Honourable Minister would want to respond to, and that is also connected, of course, to the fiscal policy of this government.
Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, come in today loaded by bear, but the front benches look like the bubonic plague has hit it. So, if I may, Mr. Speaker, directed to the Speaker. Okay.
Agriculture.
All right, Mr.
Time and time in this session, the reference has been made to Beauchesne to comment upon absences or presence of members is entirely out of order. Question, please.
Mr. Speaker, I said the bubonic plague looked like it hit it. I hadn't referred to whether there was anything.
If you persist, the question will pass on to the Leader of the Representative Party. Please.
All right, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture. On September the 16th, the latest round of GATT negotiations, the French Foreign Trade Minister announced that the European Economic Community would not agree to the dismantling of their unfair agricultural subsidies. These are the same subsidies that caused the world trade war in agricultural products and depressed grain prices for the Western farmers to dangerously low, push the prices to very dangerously low levels. My question to Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, is can the Minister of Agriculture tell us what discussions he has had with his federal counterpart in the last few days to ensure that if the Europeans won't reduce their subsidies, Alberta farmers are accorded at least the same level of subsidies as the European farmers?
Mr. Speaker, one obviously is aware prior to going into negotiations, you always make the strongest possible statement prior to those negotiations. We're hopeful that they will reconsider their position. I know our federal counterparts are working very hard to ensure that they do reconsider their position, as is our Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, who is going to be participating firsthand on behalf of Western Canada. And I can also share with the honourable member, as he is aware, this government has been very forthcoming in their support for the agricultural sector, and I won't take the time of the House, but again, I could go through a list of programs that we've brought forward to reduce input costs for the agricultural sector, and we're going to continue with that active support that we always have come forward with in the past.
Mr. Speaker, he's present all right. And can the Minister of Agriculture tell us what steps his department has taken to open up new markets, let's get more on the positive side, for Alberta farmers in the developing world, and whether he expects any trade deals for Alberta agricultural products to be announced soon?
Mr. Speaker, we've taken a number of initiatives, and I'm happy to point to some specifics. And as I lead up to those specifics, as the honourable member is aware, the member from Little Bow asked just the other day, we have had meetings with individuals from Russia. Just the day before yesterday, I met with individuals from Japan who are very interested in us processing more of the products that we ship to the Japanese prior to selling it. We have an exchange program in place whereby we have an individual from the Department of Agriculture in Alberta working with the Japanese in Japan, and they in turn have an individual here. Plus, our Leduc plant is looking at the possibility of developing processed foods so that we can ship them to Japan much along the lines that they are accustomed to, so that our sales will be readily available on the shelves in Japanese stores.
Mr. Speaker, looking at discussing, we'd love to hear a deal announced. Speaking to the Minister, Deloitte, Haskins & Sells, accounting firm, estimate that 80% of Western Canadian poultry producers would go bankrupt if free trade with the U.S. is imposed. What steps has the Minister taken to obtain an exemption for this industry, the poultry industry, the failure of which would cost Western Canada over $100 million?
Mr. Speaker, right from the start, when the so-called enhanced trade talks began, we indicated, as have all provinces and the federal government, that those areas where there is supply-managed commodities, we will give special consideration to. One only has to examine the United States, whereby they have their own supply-managed sectors, such as the dairy, that they're not going to give up so quickly on. There's naturally a number of trade-offs involved, but we have indicated that we are going to give prime consideration to those areas that are involved in the supply organized sectors.
Mr. Speaker, we don't want to trade chickens for butter. What assurances can the minister give the Alberta farmers then that any free trade deal negotiated will not restrict the province's ability to provide future assistance to Alberta farmers, nor reduce the amount of assistance currently given this sector? Are we going to bargain away any of their rights to future assistance?
Mr. Speaker, I would be concerned of bargaining away their rights in the event that the honourable member was doing the bargaining. But because he is not doing, I don't think there is any immediate concern, because we have indicated on a consistent basis our prime consideration is for those producers within this province. We have constitutional rights as a province. Those rights cannot be violated without our concurrence, and we would not concur in the event that drastic damage was to be done.
For Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, in light of the world oversupply of wheat, corn and soybeans, and with the subsidies that the European economic countries are receiving and the United States is now subsidizing the farmers, has the Department of Agriculture done any projections, say 1 or 2 or 3 year projections as to what will happen to our farm income in this 1 or 2 or 3 year period? What projections have been done?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have done some projections. I don't have the exact figures at my fingertips, and if the honourable member would wish those, I'd be more than happy to see that he would receive them. In addition to that, the federal government has also done some projections. I should share with him that it does not look overly promising as it relates to the grain sector for the year's projections, because there is a surplus, as the honourable member has stated, and that's why we have been so active in attempting to reduce the input costs for this very prime sector.
Member for Vegreville.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the comprehensive bilateral free trade negotiations, does the minister have any plans to initiate an up-to-date assessment of just what the impact will be on all sectors of Alberta agriculture of an agreement such as this if it's concluded?
Mr. Speaker, there have been initial studies done by a number of worthwhile institutes, and the documents are public, and the initial impact overall as it relates to Alberta and Alberta agriculture show that it would be of a distinct advantage to increase our market, whereby rather than a smaller population, we have a greater market share of a population that is 10 times our size, and it is a distinct advantage to the agricultural sector to be exposed to that market.
Final supplementary on this issue, member for Cypress Redcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, I wonder if the Minister can share with the Assembly if he has been in contact with the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs and can bring us more up to date on what's actually happened in the trade negotiations that are going on right now.
Mr. Speaker, we haven't discussed it since the minister from our government had left, but we had an intense discussion prior to him leaving with both himself and the Premier, whereby we did indicate again our desire to have our government and the federal government very actively involved to reduce the high subsidy levels that the European Economic Community is involved in, such as the member mentioned in his opening statement from Westlock Sturgeon, and also with the hopes of curtailing the subsidy levels that the United States is presently involved in to offset what the European Economic Community is doing. We recognize that we don't have the population base in Canada to offer the rich subsidies that are offered by some other countries, but we have done a great deal within this province, and I'm sure all members are very proud of the action that this government has taken as it relates to agriculture.
Leader of the representative party, followed by the member for Calgary-McCall.
Mr. Speaker, my questions as well are to the Minister of Agriculture. In this House, we passed a resolution on September the 9th, and today it's September the 17th, requesting or urging the government to take action with regards to the strike lockout at Thunder Bay. We've moved some 200 cars from the west into that eastern market, whereas Thunder Bay, when it's operating, moves some 1,500 cars a day of wheat through that facility. Could the minister indicate at this time whether the federal government has made any contact with the minister and indicated that there is a timetable and some deadlines by which the federal government will take action and end that strike and intervene at this point in time?
Mr. Speaker, I can share with the honourable member, as we did yesterday, we were in contact again today with the minister responsible for the Canadian Wheat Board's office, and he has shared with us that the task force is again looking at alternate routes so that we can meet our offshore grain commitments. I would also suppose, and I share with a member that I'm supposing this, that they would like to see as to what is developing on the west coast. As the honourable member is aware, they have not taken a strike vote yet there. And again, I'm not quite sure what action they would take in the event that there was a strike vote taken and they did vote to go on strike. But they've indicated to me, as they've indicated, I'm sure, to a good number of other individuals, that they are extremely concerned about this, and they're hopeful that they will have something in a more positive way to come forward with in the very near future. But there's no denying that we are delighted that they did put in place a task force so that we can examine alternate routes for our grain deliveries.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate what message the Premier is taking to the First Ministers' Conference with regards to this matter? The Premier indicated in an earlier question period that he was prepared to put this item on the agenda or inject it into the conversation of the First Ministers' meeting. Could the Minister indicate what directions or what position the Premier will take? Will it be the request of the Prime Minister and other ministers or premiers of Western Canada to come up with some type of a firm schedule to stop the strike?
As the honourable member is aware, when the Premier responded to this some days ago, he indicated that he did have conversations with the Prime Minister on this issue. The Premier, I'm sure, will speak for himself upon his return, but if I can indicate to the honourable member that the Canadian Wheat Board has involved Alberta terminals now to a greater extent to help alleviate the situation, and I can share with the honourable member that presently ATL has received an order from the Canadian Wheat Board for the cleaning of 150 cars of number 1, 2, and 3 Durham at Lethbridge. We're also going to have the Edmonton plant at ATL very involved. So hopefully with some of the counteractions, we can offset to some degree, hopefully to a great degree, some of the hardships that are being experienced.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question. Indications are that some 200 cars have moved east, and this week only 100 more cars will move with grain into that eastern port facilities at the various locations. Could the Minister indicate from the information at hand whether that number will increase on a per-day basis, and what potentially is the capability of this alternate system that's being designed by that new agency?
Mr. Speaker, I can only share with the honourable member it is my hope that it will increase, but my greater hope is that the situation will be resolved as it relates to Thunder Bay.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, supplementary to the Minister, back again to the early request. When is the Minister going to stir himself up and ask the Premier and put the real heat on the Prime Minister to recall Parliament? Can't you just pretend they're Liberals or NDP in charge down there and get really mad for a change and go after them?
Mr. Speaker, we've been very active in pursuing any type of results that will resolve the situation at Thunder Bay. And the honourable member, I'm surprised at his comments. He endorsed what this government was doing only just a few short days ago, and we thank him for his endorsation.
The member for Calgary-McCall, followed by the member for Edmonton-Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of the Environment. The Minister yesterday indicated that the studies released on the North Saskatchewan River cost $350,000, but the Minister failed to inform the House as to the methodologies employed. How was this study conducted?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the study cost $350,000, and I seem to recall that yesterday I indicated that some 42,000 tests were taken and some 700 samples. There was an involvement from the Alberta Environmental Centre in Vegreville, and I'm sure that the member from Vegreville is very proud of their involvement in this. Samples were taken between May and November 1982 and 1983. Study took 4 years to complete, required 8 person-years of work, and about 250 man-days were required for sampling.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister again, what is being done to improve water quality downstream of the city?
In the reports that were issued yesterday, I indicated that there are really two steps that can be taken. One is to deal with the question of phosphorus removal, and the other one is to deal with the question of disinfection. And in both cases, statement was made by the Minister of the Environment yesterday that officials from Alberta Environment would be dealing with the City of Edmonton and the Capital Region Sewer Commission, which is chaired by the Mayor of St. Albert. And I talked to the Mayor of St. Albert earlier in the week and indicated that there would be follow-up discussions between Alberta Environment and his organization to see exactly how these two items should be implemented in the future.
Mr. Speaker, with the maintaining of water quality in Alberta, I'm just wondering what authorities, or are there other authorities other than the province and the Department of Environment for maintaining water quality within the river system of Alberta?
There's been involvement by every municipality to make sure that their machines, their equipment, their sewer systems, their sewage removal systems are working and working properly. And it was earlier in this week that I indicated that I tabled in the legislature a report of the province of Alberta, the position of the province of Alberta to the federal government and the other provinces in the country about certain standards that should be employed in terms of water quality standards nationwide. And I might point out to the honourable member that I think the last several days of September, the first couple of days of October, the national meeting of resource and environment ministers will be held in Alberta, and I will be the chairman of that particular meeting, and one of the items that we have on the agenda is a review of water quality standards.
Mr. Speaker, as we all know, we've had a considerable amount of precipitation in this part of the country and other parts of Alberta in the last number of weeks. I'm just wondering, has the floods that occurred just recently had any effect on the water quality, and if so, what has been done to correct that circumstance?
Well, there were no negative effects other than erosion, Mr. Speaker. Normally, flooding or flushing or washing outs tend to pick up the debris and the metallic compounds that are found at the base of the river and are washed downstream to another place. What it tends to do in the short term and the long term is essentially clean it up, other than for the erosion that occurs, the type that we talked about yesterday in the Assembly in the response to questions from the member from Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, could the minister indicate if his water quality experts or consultants are in fact obtaining...
Member, you've had your limit. Member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you. A supplementary on this one, Mr. Minister. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the minister said that the water quality was better than expected. I'm wondering if that means that we expected it to be bad and it was fairly good, or in fact we expected it to be absolutely terrible and it was merely awful. I suspect the second.
Mr. Speaker, that's a great question, and it really invites one into debate. One of the paragraphs that was included in the North Saskatchewan River characterization of water quality in the vicinity of Edmonton overview, I think is a very pertinent one, and perhaps, Mr. Speaker, I might just utilize a couple of lines. Basically, it says that public interest in environmental problems has in part led to improved treatment of municipal and industrial wastewaters, and water quality in the river has improved greatly since the 1950s. Yet people generally believe that water quality in the North Saskatchewan River is poor. Now, the reports issued yesterday were the fourth series of reports issued in the last couple of years, all done by scientists, including the Environment Council of Alberta, which indicated that. We had the Rudy report, a scientist at the University of Alberta, basically says a good source of raw water at most times of the year, little objective reason for health concerns associated with trace substances.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, and I'm sure that all members of the Assembly will dash out and read the report from cover to cover. Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Just supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Has the Minister any record of the number of successful water pollution prosecutions that have taken place in the last year? Sorry.
Gee, Mr. Speaker, that would be a great question for the order paper. I'd really like to get those answers specifically for me. Perhaps the member would follow through.
Thank you. The member for Edmonton Glengarry. If there's time, followed by the member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say I hate to pick on the Minister of Environment, but I would never mislead the House. I visited the Sturgeon landfill this summer and must say I was absolutely shocked by what I saw, that being a lack of control over what is dumped there, and including numerous barrels that seem to go into the dump. I'm wondering, in light of this, if the Minister is satisfied that the present system of small-town landfill sites is secure enough to present indiscriminate dumping of dangerous chemicals into these landfills.
Gee, Mr. Speaker, I'd sure hate to get into another minister's area of responsibility, but that landfill jurisdiction follows under the public health units, and my understanding is that the Minister of Community Health is the one who tends to answer questions on that. But I can throw in my opinion on that before we get to it.
Opinion's not required. Member for Edmonton Glengarry perhaps would like to redirect the next question to the appropriate minister.
If he doesn't want to answer the last one, I would ask then if the Minister of Community Health is confident that, or the Minister of the Environment, just in case he wants to claim credit for this one, if he's confident that the much vaunted program of improved pesticide container storage is really safe and effective as previously he believed. Whichever one.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is asking for an opinion. What we have done now in the province of Alberta is set up a series of mechanisms to clean up the environment. And in the case of containers of pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and the like, we have currently now in place, and it's a relatively new procedure, a system whereby purchasers of such chemicals have an opportunity to return those barrels through their local agricultural service boards or through their local salespeople in the communities that live in. Eventually, those units, those containers, plastic containers we're talking about now, are taken to a series of regional landfills in the province of Alberta, and periodically during the year, Alberta Environment picks them all up. Now, the volumes of numbers of these barrels is approximately 800,000. One of the reasons that we are having the Environment Council of Alberta this very year hold public hearings on the very important question of recycling is to determine exactly what we can be able to do with those containers, rather than simply burying them as has happened in the past. I honestly believe that we can recycle those materials and we can help eliminate landfill pollution in the province of Alberta and perhaps find a new growth industry out of garbage in this province. So we're taking all that together. So the answer, not happy with what's happening today in terms of what the reality is, but I'm happy that we're moving in the right direction to solve the problem, and we intend to be very vigilant and very aggressive about it.
Thank you. Later, perhaps we can look over some photos I have and discuss those, but for now I'd like to file 3 copies of laboratory tests done on samples taken at the Sturgeon landfill, and they indicated a number of very dangerous chemicals were there. And I would like to ask, is the Minister aware that 45-gallon drums can be and are being dumped and in this landfill and perhaps in other landfills with no questions asked whatsoever?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has information with respect to testing. I surely hope that he would have taken the initiative to provide that information to the municipal government, which has the responsibility for the landfill. Now, in addition to that, if he has not done that, I'd be delighted if he would pass that on to me today, and I will ensure that the MD of Sturgeon has access to this very important public safety information that the member has, and as I understand, is still not passed on to the MD of Sturgeon nor to the local public health unit. Now, we've had this happen on several occasions, Mr. Speaker, with respect to public safety. If the honourable member is going to stand up in this assembly and try to make cheap political points on environmental issues that I believe should be dealt with in a nonpartisan fact.
Honourable member. There's always a question with respect to procedures. There's no doubt about that for all of us. The final supplementary on this issue, which will be a question without further statements, involved member for Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you. I would like to ask the minister if he would like to arrange for the municipal district to test these samples, one of which is the one I had tested, and take whatever measures are necessary to make sure that chemicals of this very dangerous nature do not continue to be dumped in that landfill, because they are dangerous.
Mr. Minister, there's a difficulty. There's been no request to file the material which is here in the Assembly, and I ordered the Sergeant at Arms to have it removed immediately. There's no request for filing, and what has happened here is a personal request from one member to another. Next question will be the member for Edmonton Gold Bar, followed by the member for Athabasca Lac La Biche.
He's small enough to carry about.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture. Agriculture on the prairies generates more than $10 billion annually in farm incomes. The threat posed by improper soil management is an extremely important issue. The Science Council of Canada, in its recent report on soil degradation in Canada, estimates that soil degradation costs Alberta farmers $429 million annually. The question to the Minister is, can the Minister of Agriculture tell us how much of the government's budgeted $595 million for agriculture is devoted to soil conservation programs, and whether he feels this is enough given the annual cost of $429 million from the problem?
Mr. Speaker, as is the case with all programs, we wish that we could do more. As the honourable member is aware, and we hear it on a repeated basis from her party, that we have to do everything we possibly can to reduce our budgetary deficit. I would hope that she is making representations so that we can spend more money in this area, because it is a deep concern. I should share with the honourable member that we are going to have a study forthcoming within the next number of weeks, which will offer a number of alternatives to us as to how we can offset some of the difficulties that we are facing as it relates to soil erosion. I must indicate, though, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure you would concur, that it would be more appropriately put either in our budget estimates, which we have had a chance to discuss, and I didn't notice the honourable member participate, and it was also brought up this morning at public accounts, and had the member a sincere interest, I'm sure she would have participated in one of those two debates.
It's not quite fair. Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the lecture, Mr. Minister. Can the Minister tell the Assembly what discussions he has had with his counterparts across Canada regarding the creation of a national soils conservation policy as recommended by the Science Council, and perhaps why we don't already have one in place?
Mr. Speaker, I am waiting for the recommendations from a number of groups that are involved in the release of the study that will be forthcoming in a few weeks. I'm more than happy to take up the view as expressed by the honourable member so that we can have further discussions with the agricultural ministers, both at the federal level and the other provincial ministers, to pursue that goal. But I would put the one caveat on it, in that I'd like to see the study that is presently being done, and it should be forthcoming in a matter of weeks.
Mr. Speaker, the Science Council recommends that the province hire additional soil conservation specialists to work directly with farmers. The Minister has already spoken about the need for more funds. Can the Minister tell us if he in fact has any such plans, when and how many new soil specialists Alberta farmers can expect to be hired to address the seriousness of this problem?
Mr. Speaker, again, I would await the study that I referred to earlier prior to giving a specific commitment, but I'm sure the honourable member can appreciate also that it is going to be rather difficult for us to hire more soil scientists during this period of restraint within our provincial government.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Science Council estimates the problem will cost prairie farmers $2.7 billion annually in 20 years if we don't do anything. Perhaps the Minister of Agriculture can tell us of any plans that he has to adjust within his department to assist farmers to improve their soil management techniques.
Mr. Speaker, had the honourable member inquired, she would be aware that we do have individuals within our department that are in constant contact with our rural population as it relates to soil conservation. We do have an information flow and work very closely with the agricultural sector with the hope that the farming population itself will exercise proper stewardship as it relates to their land.
Member for Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche.
To the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the session appears to be about to end, and I want to be sure to ask questions regarding the historic tripartite conference on Aboriginal rights next March, in the event we don't reconvene before then. Given the widespread concern, and that many of them have been expressed to me by Aboriginal people, about the phrase existing rights in the 1982 constitutional resolution, what is the policy of this government on the importance of maintaining or changing that phrase and concept?
Mr. Speaker, that amendment was made to a proposed constitutional package by negotiation in 1981 or 82. It was thought that some provinces or the federal government of the day needed the reference to existing in order that the argument would not be made that the Constitution was granting further rights beyond those that had been historic and were existing at the time.
Time for question period has expired. Might the Assembly give unanimous consent to this line of questioning being completed? Opposed? Carried. Honourable Member for Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche.
Now, this is some debate in terms of interpretation of the word existing. Now, in terms of specific constitutional changes, what is the government's primary goal for this next round of tripartite negotiation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't want, on behalf of the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs, to answer in detail in respect to all of the things that could transpire at the conference next March. I wanted, though, to respond in a historical context in respect to the reference to existing. If there's a concern over that, I'm not aware of any policy to rethink that. I think it was done at the time by consensus and is firmly established.
What discussion has occurred with the Native community and its leadership regarding their concern over enforcement of gaming licensing and enforcement on the Indian Reserve, given the movement towards self-government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the whole question of Native self-government is one that indeed has to be addressed by the conference with the federal and all provincial governments present. I would think that my colleague, the Minister of Forestry and Wildlife, could perhaps add something in respect to enforcement policy, in respect to hunting and other aspects. I know he's had many discussions in that respect. What place considerations like that will play in the conference next March, which is certainly a very important and historic conference, I can't predict at this time.
Final supplementary. There's been a number of of raids on bingo halls and on Native community. Why has the government not declared a moratorium on intervention by provincial gaming official on the reserve until the negotiation next March are concluded, like some other provinces have already have done?
Mr. Speaker, I thought the honourable member in this question was talking about game. If he's talking about gaming, that's different, and I can respond to that. I would have to, you know, hunting and fishing. I could respond in respect to gaming only in a limited way, because enforcement and investigation policies, of course, are those of the police forces to some extent, and they, of course, receive some guidance from the Attorney General's department in respect to the laying of prosecutions. I think the issue is complex, and I don't deny that it's important and should be addressed. It's complex in the sense that on Indian reserves, the federal law, so far as that is based on the federal jurisdiction under the Constitution, and so long as the accord is there between the treaties and the federal law, that is the federal law, one might say, runs in the reserves. But at the same time, there's a constitutional principle that provincial laws of general application also apply to such reserves. That is a small measure, Mr. Speaker, of the complexity. I conclude by saying I acknowledge the importance and the relationship between the question and the issue of self-government. And I think those issues deserve further addressing.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
To the Attorney General, would he not, in view of the fact that the provincial government enforces federal laws on gambling, and in this particular instance where they're raiding Indian or Native bingo games, talk to his enforcers and point out to them that this is more in the nature of a family gambling thing, and rather than a public thing? Is it not different to having a bingo in a reserve?
Order, Honourable Member. This brief supplementary is getting into paragraph form, and perhaps since the Attorney General is not present in the House, the Minister of Municipal Affairs might take it as notice and hand it on to his colleague. Time for question period has come to an end. The Minister of the Environment wishes to supplement an answer given previous in this session, in this today's proceedings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this afternoon, the member from Westlock Sturgeon asked me if water quality control orders had been issued to Esso Chemicals and Sherwood Gordon Mines Limited in the past. I indicated none had been issued to Esso Chemicals in the past, and I've now been informed that none have been issued to Sherwood Gordon Mines Limited either in the past.
I'm allowed to respond, I gather, Mr. Speaker.
Ask another one.
No supplementary information. I didn't ask whether just those particular people had been charged. I wanted to know what charges for anyone for polluting water in the last year.
The blues will indeed be checked into, and again the matter with respect to whether the further detail might be indeed given consideration for the order paper. The chair has been notified that there's a point of order. Member for Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a matter of grave concern to the people sitting in this area. I feel we've been exposed to a dangerous chemical, and we have no assurance from the member of Glengarry that it was properly sealed up to environmental standards. Our health is endangered, having been exposed negligently to these things, even more so than the people in the county of Sturgeon, and I think that we may have to be evacuated.
The issue has been given sufficient profile for consideration by all members of the Assembly. The Chair would also point out that the various members of the Assembly from time to time have been falling into the very lackadaisical habit of referring to only partial names of constituencies, and this has been happening from all corners of the Assembly. This matter, on this issue, I'd point out that the member for Edmonton-Glengarry was the one who was the transporter of goods, whether they were dangerous or otherwise, but the matter has been noted. Orders of the day.